How come even during the Nazi times, Germans were hiding Jewish families and helping save Jewish families, but during this time, not one Palestinian from Gaza has surfaced to rescue hostages?
If I was in charge with the Palestinian Authority, I would erase these refugee camps with bulldozers.
What the media was showing me was very different from the reality. But when I went to Gaza, every time I was there, I was a little scared. I had my balls right here.
I'm a very peaceful person, but to be honest with you, Daniel, if the fight came to my neighborhood, I would have picked up a Kalashnikov and fought.
Welcome to Conversations with Builders. I'm Daniel Lubetzky. I'm very honored to have here my friend and partner, Ezzeldeen Masri.
Ezzeldeen Masri, a Palestinian American from the Gaza Strip, born to a father who's a native Gazan and a mother who's a refugee of the War of 1948.
We met in interesting circumstances close to 2 decades ago in Gaza.
Yes.
I was picked up, I think, by you and others in a motorcade with a lot of metralletas, how do you say, machine guns.
Yeah.
Supposedly protect me, but for me it felt more like, oh my God, I don't want people knowing that I'm here. Before I ask you a lot more questions, let me just introduce myself for those that don't know me. I'm Daniel Lubetzky. I was born in Mexico City, came to the United States when I turned 16 here. My father was a Holocaust survivor. He survived Dachau, liberated by American soldiers. That shaped a lot about who I am. Married my mom in Mexico. Her parents had immigrated before the war to Mexico. I've always worked really hard on building bridges to prevent what happened to my dad from happening to others. I'm better known as the founder of Kind, the healthy snack company, but what a lot of people don't know is I, together with Ezzeldeen and over 300 people, we founded the Builders Movement to help replace this us versus them mentality with a problem-solving toolkit. And before that, together with Ezzeldeen and thousands of other Israelis and Palestinians, we built a movement called One Voice to empower citizens to seize back the agenda away from terror and extremism and to try to empower Israelis, Palestinians, and international citizens to propel their leaders towards solutions that are better for society. Yes. Why don't you talk a little bit about the circumstances under which you and I met?
Around October 2006, I was in contact with the Palestinian Authority President Office. I had worked shortly for the Palestinian Diplomatic Corps. So my boss was Majd al-Khaldi, who's now advisor to the President on Diplomatic Affairs. He called me and he said, this organization wants to meet with you, and the founder of the organization, his name is Daniel Lubetzky. Majdi wanted me to welcome Daniel in Gaza. And I told him, yes, I will go pick him up from Erez. That's the crossing between Israel and Gaza. He said, how are you going to do that? I said, I'm going to take my car, my Subaru, and go pick him up. How am I going to do that? He said, no, this guy is a businessman. He's American. And we want, the Palestinian Authority wants to provide security for him. So you go to the General Intelligence compound in Gaza City and you ask for protection. And I got the protection, 3 cars, like Daniel said.
So I should blame Majdi for this, not you. Because it felt like we were putting a target in our backs with sirens and 3 trucks full of machine guns. And it was a little bit intimidating because I'm like, now they know that I'm here.
Well, then Majdi knew something I didn't. Majdi knew that you were Jewish American. And for a Jewish person to come into Gaza, it's extremely dangerous for that person. That's why...
When you and I met, you didn't know I was Jewish?
No.
How much later did you find out that I was Jewish?
When you left.
After I left? Did I tell you or it was after?
No. So my brother Noor, he said Daniel has, when he speaks, he kind of sound Israeli.
Would you have taken the assignment in 2006 had you known that I was Jewish?
Maybe not. Because I would have been scared for you to be in Gaza. You understand, for a Jewish person to come into Gaza?
Even then, already in 2006, it was...
Yes. Jews coming to Gaza armed to their teeth. Part of the IDF. Jews stopped coming into Gaza, you can say approximately around 1982, 1983, following Israel invasion of southern Lebanon and the emergence of Al-Jihad al-Islami as a strong organization in Gaza, carrying out attacks against Israeli soldiers and Israeli settlers.
When I was there, the word that they would use they never said Israeli. The word Israeli was not used in Gaza
No,
like
it's
that.
not used.
They only use Yahud.
Yahud.
The reason I went there is we had in 2000 around the year 2001, after the breakout of the Second Intifada, Mohammad Darawshe and I helped create the One Voice movement to try to build a human infrastructure against extremism on all sides and against terrorism, and to try to empower moderates to seize back the agenda. And we wanted to do it in Gaza too. We had some activities prior to meeting you, but we didn't really have a big human infrastructure.
Yes.
When I went there was to start building our board, and we ended up recruiting a lot of people, including imams and other leaders, who I guess also when I showed up initially didn't know that I was Jewish.
So Gaza is population is 2.4 million. You can say roughly 1.4 are not Gazans. They are refugees from the city surrounding Gaza. And it happened during the war of 1948. The population of Gaza back then maybe was around 60,000. And we end up absorbing around 220,000 refugees.
Around 1948, there were 60,000 people living in Gaza that were native Gazans.
Yes.
And then people, when Israel was created, people that, for whatever reasons, that the Egyptian armies and the other Arabs told them, come out so that we can then go attack. 100 to 200,000 fled and then moved into Gaza. They thought it was going to be temporary. They thought it was going to be, weeks, days?
Weeks, months. For example, the Egyptian army, some would say, we told the Palestinians in Ashkelon, which in Arabic is Mijdal, or Ashdod, which is in Arabic is Dud, what are you doing here? You are impeding our work, our military work. Go south to Gaza, and we will finish this war in a couple weeks, and you're going to come back.
With social media, we only see our side and we don't understand the other side. But you're very comfortable sharing all sides. What about you made you that way?
What made me that way? I'm a student of political science, a student of history. I am a realist. And also, I truly believe in coexistence between the Jewish people and the Palestinian Arab people. I represent the Peace Work Foundation, One Voice Movement. And these organizations have Arab, Muslim, and Jews in it. When I stand up and represent this movement, either in Palestine, the West Bank, and Israel, I must be very objective, because this organization is not a Palestinian organization. This is an international organization founded for the purpose of coexistence and ending this conflict based on the vision of two states. I must be aware that we have two narratives.
So you're saying that you being part of One Voice shaped you into who you are?
Yes.
Am I having a caricaturish assumption, or is it true that there wasn't as much international interaction for the people of Gaza?
Gaza was open to other cities in Palestine, to the extent that many people from Gaza went to work in Java, in Haifa, and the seaports. And also many Gazans went to become teachers, teaching in different villages around Gaza. So no, Gaza was connected to the Arab world, was open to the Arab world.
When I went to the West Bank, to most cities, sometimes I was surprised, sometimes I was a little intimidated, but most times I found that what the media was showing me was very different from the reality. But when I went to Gaza, every time I was there, I was a little scared, and I didn't know better. But even then, from what I knew and I could get, it felt like a very closed society. Why is it such a more conservative society in terms of religious rituals, let's say, than other places?
It wasn't like this all the time. I remember my aunt and my mother wearing many skirts in the...
Wallah.
Well, yeah. Yeah, growing up in the 70s. and my mother walking with her hair without covering it, and my aunts. Women wore sleeveless shirts
And then what
dresses.
happened? When did that start changing?
That started to change 1979, 1980, Islamic Revolution in Iran, and the establishment of al-Jihad al-Islami. Gaza society started to become more conservative and more close, to the extent I remember in the early 80s, Jihad al-Islami writing on the walls and throwing leaflets saying that they will throw acid at women who will not cover up. And it happened. They threw acid water on women who did not cover up, and attacking the theaters, burning cinemas, burning liquor stores, beating up Christians who sell alcohol. So this process did not happen overnight.
I'm terrified about how extremists hijack the world. And even if they're a tiny minority, if all of us don't stand up against the extremists, they eventually take over societies.
Yeah.
Do you have any analysis or prescription of what happened to Gaza that we cannot allow to happen to other places?
Well, others in Gaza tried to stand up to Tajammu' al-Islami. It wasn't Hamas yet. It was still known as al-Mujamma' al-Islami. But they had presence on university campuses and others. And basically, I was young back then, but what happened is Fatah and the Communist Party in Gaza and the Popular Front tried to stand up to al-Mujamma' al-Islami. They had many fights on campus, and one of the fights got very big that the activists from al-Mujamma' al-Islami went and burned the Red Crescent, which was run by the Palestinian Communist Party. And when I talk about these fights, the IDF soldiers be watching. The IDF is watching, and they don't interfere.
One of the things that I struggle a lot with ideologically in the work I'm trying to do is that sometimes you do need to fight. Hamas cannot be allowed to reconstitute itself in Gaza, or else 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, we're going to repeat this horrible tragedy. It won't be good for the Israelis or the Palestinians, for the Jews or the Muslims, for anybody. And sometimes on the peace camp, they want to build bridges, which is important, but then they only want to build bridges. They don't understand that you cannot build bridges if Hamas is in power. And then sometimes the people that want to fight Hamas, they want to destroy Hamas, but they don't understand that they also need to build bridges. We need to do both. The Yitzhak Rabin approach was fight terror as if there's no peace and pursue peace as if there's no terror. Go and destroy Hamas while empowering the bridge builders like Ezzeldeen.
I think that at one point you shouldn't be shy or afraid from using violence against those terrorist extremists, and you need to stand your ground. I'm a very peaceful person, but to be honest with you, Daniel, in 2007, if Fatah fought and Mahmoud Abbas gave orders to fight, and if the fight came to my neighborhood, I would have picked up a Kalashnikov and fought against Hamas. So Hamas needs to agree to surrender power in Gaza, not to the Israelis, but to the Arab countries, namely Egypt, Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and the Palestinian Authority.
But do you think that will ever happen? I cannot imagine Hamas voluntarily surrendering. I think they need to be defeated to the last man. I don't think they're going to, I think ideologically they don't mind dying. I think for there to be a future for the Israeli and the Palestinian people, Hamas cannot be allowed to reconstitute its cult of death and its infrastructure of terrorism.
Hamas will not voluntarily give up power in Gaza. This is the last stronghold of the Jama'at al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim brotherhoods in the Middle East.
We're never going to solve this conflict if everybody's a refugee. How are we going to turn the page so that the refugees stop being refugees without destroying Israel?
Well, I mean, you know, if the PLO believes in a two-state solution and signed the Oslo for a two-state solutions, they know that not most of the refugees will go back, okay? This has to do with the international community will. What does that mean? The international community in 1949 established UNRWA, the agencies for helping Palestinians to work This agency, UNRWA, was created only and exclusively for Palestinian refugees, with the promise that we are going to take care of you until you go back to your villages. And by the way, when Israel was accepted into the United Nations as a full member state, Israel agreed to allow for the Palestinian to go back, Palestinian refugees to go back. That was the condition for Israel to enter the United Nations as a full member state.
Do you think that the creation of UNRWA and its methodology was a mistake because it just perpetuates this absolutist concept where, like, your mom and her, the Gazan refugees and other refugees, they want the whole enchilada, and Israel's never going to allow the destruction of its state. No, nobody's going to self-destruct themselves. If you had all the powers, would you disband UNRWA and replace it with processes for people to learn to coexist? Or what would you do?
If I was in charge with the Palestinian Authority, I would erase these refugee camps with bulldozers. Because you shouldn't be a refugee in your homeland. You shouldn't be a refugee living in a miserable condition in your homeland, in your country, in your state. You shouldn't be.
Really, from 2001 or 2 all the way till like 2015, I used to regularly go with Palestinian activists and have very tough conversations. And it was interesting because sometimes when you show that you can be a partner and you accept the humanity of the other side, you understand their pain. And I would always start by acknowledging their perspective, and then I'll explain my perspective and what my father went through and why I'm determined to always be a Zionist and respect Israel's right. But a Zionist not the way they see it, a Zionist that respects also their rights. And it was interesting. We would have huge, huge breakthroughs. So I do have hope that that can be done. But to your point, you need to have all the Arab governments and the Palestinian leadership and the international leadership recognizing that indulging extremist visions of the UNRWA is actually counterproductive. And we're not going to be able to get there if you're educating every Palestinian to try to go back to Tzfat. Let me ask you a really tough question. How many people like you exist? Like, I know a handful that have the courage to speak publicly and openly about this.
When the Bibi's family announced it, I really got upset. I seen the woman with her red-head babies, and I seen her face and the agony on her face. I felt sorry for her back then. And I really felt very sorry for her and her kids when I heard that they were killed during the war. So instantly I wrote on my Facebook that whoever kidnapped the Jewish woman and her kids are not Muslims and they don't represent Islam. I think over 120 people like what I said. And if you read the comments, another maybe 20 or 30 comments, many people agreed with what I said.
You know, as one of the hardest things for me to do this work, and I'm sure for you too, is sometimes wondering whether the work you're doing is just being wasted. And seeing so much pain from children on both sides. But one of the complaints that my Jewish friends tell me when I say, I have my partner Ezzeldeen Masri and I have other Palestinian partners, I've been there, I've spent 30 years doing this work. One of the complaints are like, well, Daniel, how come even during the Nazi times, Germans were hiding Jewish families and helping save Jewish families, but during this time, not one Palestinian from Gaza has surfaced to rescue hostages or report where they're being hidden? And I don't have an answer to that.
I tell you the answer. You feel sorry and you are in tears for 250 Israelis who were brought as hostages into Gaza, but Hamas has been holding us hostage since 2007, over 2 million people. We are kidnapped by Hamas, literally kidnapped by Hamas and forgotten by the Palestinian Authority, the Arabs and the international community. Hamas practice all kind of torture and all kind of intimidation against its people who oppose Hamas, to the extent that they will kill him. They will kill people.
Literally.
They will shoot them.
They shoot them in the kneecaps.
In the kneecap, in the foot, or kill them. People in Gaza are afraid, intimidated. You see in videos of Hamas gunmen masked shooting people with the Kalashnikovs in their legs and etc.
Do you think the main reason why
People
Palestinians, they're scared?
They're scared. We are scared from Hamas. They will kill you. And nothing will happen if they kill you. Gaza is a big prison. There is no escaping Hamas. If Hamas wants to kill you in Gaza or arrest you in Gaza, they are the dominant political party. They are armed to their teeth, and no one can protect you from Hamas. I was fearless in Gaza to work under Hamas, and I believed that was my destiny. I really believed that was my destiny.
What was your destiny?
My destiny is to stand up in Gaza and say in Arabic that we want to end this occupation through negotiation leading to a two-state solution and coexistence. Our path crossed, me and you, back in 2006. You left Gaza, and I became one voice, and until now, I feel a sense of ownership of the organization and advancing its goal. And I thought of myself as the leader of this organization in Gaza, and I need to say what needs to be said. And I knew that what I am saying is not, Hamas is not going to like it. That's why every time I want to do a town hall meeting or a training or an event, I make sure that my wife Yvette, who is Spanish American, has your phone number, your email, and the American Embassy phone numbers and emails to tell them Ezzeldeen did not come back.
When October 7th happened, it was horrible to see the atrocities, but also it was very sad to see a lot of celebrations.
Yes.
Who was celebrating? All Gazans?
I saw the Hamas people coming back with the jeeps and with the Israeli captives into Gaza, and I seen a mix of feelings among Gazans. A feeling of revenge. Those Jews, they killed us, they invaded us, uprooted us, and now, you know, we hit them back. Revenge. I seen people celebrating, but also I seen people who are scared. What's gonna happen after this? And also people who did not believe that bringing babies and women, and especially older women. Remember, they brought older women. They thought it should be directed at the soldiers, not at women and babies. But in general, the people of Gaza, they have been imprisoned since 2005, 2006. So you're talking about 20 years. They've been subject to multiple wars and invasion by the Israeli army. No electricity, economic situation very bad.
But when you say they've been imprisoned, they imprisoned themselves, both by allowing Hamas to rise and also by turning billions of dollars in aid into building terrorist infrastructure and by allowing it's sad because I do think that they are, like you said earlier, they themselves are hostage to Hamas, but it's Hamas that imprisoned them. Like, there was borders crossings and a ton of aid that went in, and they used it to build a incredible infrastructure.
Hamas did, but not all the people of Gaza are Hamas. People of Gaza is 2.4 million. So maybe you want to say Hamas are 60, maybe 100,000 people who are Hamas activists, Hamas members. They are the one who dug the tunnels. They are the one who caused us misery in Gaza. But most of the population in Gaza are not Hamas. They are normal people who want to live and raise their kids.
What support would Hamas have today if there were elections?
So if you are not a core Hamas member, or the brother or the sister or the father of a Hamas core member, you won't like Hamas, because Hamas literally brought disaster among us. So naturally the people don't like Hamas because they lost because of Hamas. But you have those who like Hamas, hardcore Hamas members and their families or supporters.
What was fascinating to me is after all this destruction, the way they try to show when they're doing these hostage releases, which is really inhumane, and I don't even understand why anybody would allow.
But they are masters when it comes to propaganda.
But they create the sense that they're still...
Hamas did not take a decision to confront the Israeli invading army in Gaza. Hamas took the decision to preserve its members and its arms and to hide in a very deep tunnels throughout Gaza for the next day after the war.
So do we have but they also never imagined that this is what would happen, right? They
did not imagine the Israeli would come and do a full-scale invasion from Beit Lahia to Rafah, but the Israelis did it. But Hamas spent over $1 billion digging tunnels, maybe more.
Billions. But
Yeah.
what is your sense from what you read about their strength? If it was at 100% prior to October 7th, what would it be today?
It's not 100%. We say that approximately maybe around 50,000 Palestinians were killed. Half of them are Hamas.
But how many soldiers did they have before and how many do they have now?
They say that they had an arm like around 60,000 underarm Hamas militia in Gaza. Hamas doesn't have no problem with recruiting. So if somebody dies, there is 1, 2, 3 ready to take his Kalashnikov.
You know how Israel incredibly destroyed the head of Hezbollah and with the things? Can you dismantle the Hamas leadership infrastructure so that they cannot continue operating as an organization, or it's not doable?
It's doable, but Hamas is different than Hezbollah. Hezbollah was relaxed. Hezbollah, after Israel withdrew from Lebanon in 2000, Hezbollah fighters for the past 25 years, they just were enjoying life and being very exposed and thinking Israel will never get back to them. They were lazy, okay, when it came to security, personal security and organization security. But Hamas is not. Hamas is very organized and they have discipline. Muhammad al-Daif, who they killed just like a couple of months ago, this guy was wanted for the past 30 years. And Israel was thinking that he's handicapped, he's lost his eye, and etc. And the guy was in full health.
Is there a way to turn the people in Gaza against Hamas so that they start reporting them?
There is the war. When the people of Gaza notice that Hamas is not strong, they will eat them alive. But as long that they know that Hamas is strong, the people are intimidated to attack Hamas.
I'm not a military person, but as a person that's observing, what I find shocking is that they still control the food aid, because then they basically control the destiny of the Palestinian people. I find it very upsetting because that gives them so much power, no?
It gives them power. Daniel, it's a complicated subject, because when we talk about Hamas and eradicating Hamas and confronting Hamas, we always need to think about a Palestinian entity, a Palestinian authority, a Palestinian state that should do that job. That job shouldn't be left to a foreign country, that it is Israel or Egypt or United Arab Emirates. And Yasser Arafat made a strategic mistake when he ordered the eruption of the second uprising and started arming Hamas and Jihad al-Islami and bringing Karina A-Shib from Iran with all that weapons that Israel intercepted. Yasser should have been smart enough to grab whatever Uhud Barak gave him and Clinton gave him in Camp David 2000 and came back with a Palestinian state. Back then, I was 27 years old. I just had finished my bachelor degree and went back to Gaza. I went to volunteer in the foreign ministry. We all thought that that's it. The occupation is finished. Yasser gonna come back with a state. We were very happy. But Yasser rejected.
Do you sense that he did want to have peace with Israel, but he just was negotiating?
I think that Yasser Arafat was ready to make peace with Israel.
You think so?
And his partner was Ishaq Rabin and Shimon Peres.
But he made also a horrible mistake. And one of the things that's interesting is that around the summer of 2000, Jews and Israelis were very excited. And I guess the people in the negotiations department of the Palestinian Authority were also. What I've heard is that Arafat was also trying to let the boiling temperature out by supporting the second intifada because there was resentment towards him. Am I right about that, or am I misreading it?
Prior to Arafat launching because Arafat launched the second uprising. He manufactured the second uprising. He gave orders for the second uprising. Arafat is not a Zionist. Arafat is a Palestinian leader. And Arafat is the father of Palestinian nationalism. Arafat is credited of making a nation out of desperate refugees. Yes, Arafat used the petrodollar from Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, and the PLO became very wealthy organizations, and he used the money.
And he took billions for himself.
Maybe he did, okay, to manipulate Palestinians and different factions, okay. But Arafat in the end is a Palestinian leader. And Arafat didn't want to accept anything less than 22%. And when I say 22%, it means East Jerusalem, the capital, Gaza, and the West Bank, connected either with a tunnel or a bridge or with a road.
When I was building One Voice and I was partnering with you, Arafat was greater than, like, he defined Palestinian identity.
Yeah.
After he died, and certainly today, I never hear his name. I don't hear him being talked about by Palestinians.
Well, Arafat died 20 years ago.
Yeah, but he was like, in the Jewish parallel, if it'd be Theodor Herzl, he's still deeply celebrated.
He's still deeply celebrated.
Arafat is beloved?
Yeah, Arafat is beloved. Yes, Arafat is beloved by Palestinians. Yeah.
Today,
yeah. And Arafat was true for a two-state solution. But
you think so?
I think so.
That's where you and I disagree. Is your mom still living?
Yes.
Would she be willing to accept a two-state solution?
Yeah, now yes.
Wallah?
Yeah, now yes.
As of when?
As of when I started talking to her, okay, about two-state solution and the compromise we need to make to end the occupation and to have a Palestinian state and to get rid of the settlements and for us to live in a free state, and we're gonna get compensated for the property in Safad. As long as that property we are not compensated for it, meaning we did not sign a paper saying we received compensation for it, I will still say that the Takhana Markazit in Sfat belongs to my grandfather Nuruddin Ayyub, because that's his property.
The Hanan Markazit is like the transportation hub.
Yes.
And you're saying that's where your mom's...
Well, that's where his house is. That's where his property. I met him. I met my grandfather Nuruddin Ayyub in Chicago when I came. I was 18 years old and he was in his 80s. And he told me, and he drew a map for me, and he already had visited that area. He visited his property in 1974. He came to visit through the Red Cross with my grandma, Amina, and my father arranged for an Arab Israeli to come and pick them up to go to Safad. And my father went with them. And my family, Ayyub family, are Kurds. They are not Arab. They are Arab Kurds. The Kurds who speak Arabic.
Who are?
Yes, my mom.
Your mom's side?
Yes, they're Kurds. Because they came with Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. We are Ayyubis. We are part of the Ayyubi clan. So Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi is my great
So from your dad's
grandfather.
side, hundreds of years ago, you were Egyptian. From your mom's side, you were Kurdish. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Kurd, yeah. And their property is in the Kurdish quarter, which is right next to the Jewish quarter. To go to the Kurdish quarter, you have to go through the Jewish quarter, okay?
Your mom was born in Sfat?
My mom was born in
Safad.
Yeah.
And her parents?
Her parents for 900 years.
Also, the Kurdish thing was a long time
He
ago.
was Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, the one who defeated the Kurds, the one who defeated the Crusaders.
Got it, so hundreds of years ago.
Around 1001.
But who's counting?
Yeah, okay. So they stayed there since then. When I went there, and according to the map, I found the property right next to Takhana Markazit, the bus station.
In Gazan culture and society, do the natives feel that they're above the refugees, or do the refugees feel that they're above the natives, or both?
So the refugees feel above the nation. The refugees, they believe they are above the natives because they believe that they are more nationalist and more fighter in resisting the occupation and resisting the Israelis. And the natives, they feel more superior to the refugees because they have their own land and their own villages and their cities, and they were not deported from their land.
And still today, the natives and the refugees are, for the most part, pretty separate?
For the most part, pretty separate, because most of the refugees, they still live in refugee camps. And for a native who lives in a city or lives in a village, he doesn't want his daughter to go live in a refugee camp.
And are the natives more resentful of Hamas because they ended up destroying all their homes?
When Hamas started to emerge in the 80s, they recruited the natives and they invested in the natives. But now, both refugees and natives, the majority, they don't like Hamas because it destroyed their houses, their neighborhoods, and killed their sons and fathers.
Israelis often say that Palestinians are taught to hate the Jews and the Israelis. Yeah. Did you feel that when you were going to school, you and your surroundings, because you had a very special father, but in general, where and today are Palestinian kids taught to hate the Yahuds and the Israelis?
The hate comes from the family first. For example, grandfathers, grandmothers, especially if they are refugees living in a refugee camp, living on UNRWA food ration and going to UNRWA school, the fathers, the grandfathers will be telling the kids, the Zionists, the Jews, they made us refugees, they took our land. Like, for example, my mom, narrative was different than my father's narrative. My mom would tell me from the age of 6 and 7 that the Jews are thieves. They took our house, and the Jews are cowards, and we are strong because we are on the right side of the history, and the Jews are on the wrong side of the history. They made us refugees. They took our land. They killed our family. And she would recite what happened to her in Safad, and she would talk about her brothers taking part in resisting the Jews and joining different factions of the PLO, and about fighting the Jews, and to the extent that she would say, like, if a bullet hits you and die, you don't feel it and you become a martyr and stuff like that. So if you are the son of a refugee father and a refugee mother living in a refugee camp, that's what you talk about during when the family is there.
And my perception is that UNRWA is teaching hate, and I want to disband UNRWA and replace it with a schooling system that will teach Palestinian nationalism within the constructs of coexistence with their neighbors, including peace with Israel.
Yeah.
But you're saying, Daniel, it's actually coming from the parents.
Yeah.
What hope is there ever that the parents are going to teach their kids to want to coexist and build together with the Israelis?
When there is a light at the end of the tunnel. When there is a light at the end of the tunnel. When the parents and the grandparents feel that we are on the brink of having peace with Israel, and in the occupation, having a Palestinian state, them being compensated for their property, then I think gradually the narrative will change. But you cannot expect from somebody who's a victim, and it's up to you to consider them victim or not, because you are not one of them. I am one of them. And I think they are victims. When somebody is driven out of his house, either by the Zionist or by the Arab armies, he lost his property. And he had a house and a villa and an orange field, and now he lives miserable in a refugee camp.
600,000 Jews were also kicked out of Arab nations, and then they managed to settle all across the world and move on. But at some point, I reject this framework of victim versus oppressor, because I don't want to ever be a victim, and I don't want my friends to be victims, because victims have things happen to them, and then they never can make things happen. Protagonists and leaders build together. So I don't want for my people to see themselves as victim or for your people to see themselves as a victim. I want both of us to be protagonists for a better future. It's hard to say that, but ultimately it's the only way to build forward.
It is, but the Jewish experience is different than the Palestinian experience. For example, the Jewish from Yemen, they came in Operation Magic Carpet to Israel, and they found a state that took care of them, educated them, gave them positions, did not treat them with prejudice. But us Palestinians, we didn't have that. We weren't kicked out of Yevna and Ashkelon, uprooted, and then went to a Palestinian state that treated us decently and gave us resources and made citizens out of us.
Let me ask a very practical question about Gaza connected to this. Currently, Gaza is controlled by Hamas.
Yeah.
As we're going to want to rebuild Gaza, we don't want Hamas to get the credit for that, right? We want Hamas to be disbanded, and we want builders to get the keys to the future, so there's a future of peace and hope for both peoples. We created something called the Builder's Blueprint with a methodology to try to rebuild different sectors and then invite builders. Like, you have to sign a Gazan that accepts certain principles of dignity and freedom and security for your people and for your neighbors. You sign on and you say, I'm going to be a Palestinian builder. I want to build a Palestinian state in peace with Israel. Here, then you get keys to a new home, education for your children, that's education for them to become lawyers and doctors, and healthcare and opportunities and jobs. But we started liberating each neighborhood by neighborhood from Hamas, building in partnership with the Arab world, the Hamulas and the Israelis, an opportunity for the Gazan people that want to be builders, and handing them keys one sector at a time, and then building a nation of builders. Is that a dream from a crazy Mexican Jew, or is that possible to do?
It's very challenging to do. It's very challenging to do. Because you could do it, for example, with the native villages. Like, for example, in northern Gaza, you only have 3 villages: Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, and Jabalia. With the population, only natives of these villages, like maybe around, let's say, 100,000. Okay? But in northern Gaza, we have a population that exceeds 600,000, meaning
a lot of refugees.
A lot of refugees. So what are you going to do with the refugee camps? And how
turn it into high rises?
Yeah.
But first, before they can come in, they have to transcend. They
will have to forfeit the right of return, for example.
Well, but they will get compensated.
Compensated. I think such a thing is not like a crazy idea or something that
it is kind of crazy, but I just don't have a better one. It's really hard to implement.
Yeah.
I just have been thinking about this for hours, and I don't see any better way to ultimately end this conflict and build a better future for the Palestinian and the Israeli people.
Daniel, the Palestinian people, our problem is not a humanitarian problem. Our problem, we want end of the occupation, we want a Palestinian state. And as long as we don't have a Palestinian state, there will be Palestinian factions that holds arms and try to recruit others.
But don't you think the problem is also an identity problem? Don't you think that it's also a problem of Palestinians wanting to build a state for the Palestinian people more than wanting to destroy the Israeli state, like wanting to coexist? And that's kind of critical for them to be able to build a state. And until they accept that in order to build their state, they need to accept the existence of their neighbors in peace and forever, I don't know how it's going to come about. Don't we need to get there?
We need to get there, but in order to get there, you have to deal with many issues underground. And let's not forget that those people, for 77 years, have been neglected, live in refugee camps, very narrow, very filthy, unorganized, and their mentality is not totally capable of understanding the building mentality and recognizing others, and etc. They view themselves as victims, and that thought, that notion is very entrenched in their minds, and they transfer it to their kids. And it's easier to make peace and coexistence with native villages than to make with
the refugees. Lately, Hamas has been holding ceremonies when they hand over the hostages, and I'm just curious if you discuss those with your friends and family and how they perceive them.
Yeah, I did actually, and it's like a big thing also on social media, and many different opinions about it. But in general, I think the people who I'm associated with, my friends and the circle that I am around, they think it's unnecessary for many different reasons. One is the fact that the Israelis don't do the same when they release Palestinian prisoners. They don't put them on the stage, they don't give them gifts, they don't, and etc. So they say we shouldn't treat the Israelis in that manner. And the other, they would say it's humiliating, and the other would say it's like staged, it's not real. For example, when they had the last prisoners who were let go, it was obvious that the cameraman went and whispered to the Israeli hostage to kiss the forehead of the Hamas gunman. And apparently the Israeli hostage did not understand Arabic. So the other had to translate to the Israeli. So it was like people were making fun of it, as if if you really needed to do this, you should practice before you are on stage, because it looked like that you're staging it.
Makes my blood boil.
I hear you.
And also, I struggle so much because I feel bad for the families, for all the suffering on the Palestinian and Israeli side. But I just find it very troubling with negotiating with Hamas, given that I don't want, for the sake of the future, I don't want them to stay in power. I don't want them to be empowered by using that to advance their...
Yeah, and maybe Hamas doesn't want to release all the Israelis all at once, and they want to release every week or 2 weeks, 1 or 2, because then it will take a long time for the prisoners to be released, and then it will become normal for Hamas to continue ruling the Gaza Strip, and this is their long-term strategy.
Yeah, I don't think they'll ever release the final person.
Yeah, and now Israel has like approximately around 69 hostages in Gaza remaining out of almost like what, 250, and those 69, Israel
Most
said
of them are dead.
around 36 are dead.
Or more.
So you're talking about maybe 20 Israelis who are...
I mean, I feel bad. Every person that's a parent of any of those hostages should try to get them back. But just the Gilad Shalit release, when they released 1,005 terrorists, including Sinwar, who then committed October 7th.
Yeah.
For me, you're tempting the future and you're creating the wrong incentives by negotiating with terrorists.
You know how many Yahya Sinwar they released? Hundreds of Yahya Sinwar they released.
And so how do you feel about that?
Not because of Gaza, I'm scared because of the West Bank. Those who are released in the West Bank are very dangerous prisoners, participating in recruiting suicide bombers and sending suicide bombers to their mission. And for them to be released after serving, for example, a life sentence or etc., for the West Bankers, this is a show of force. Meaning, if I'm a young Palestinian contemplating joining Hamas and scared to do so, seeing Abdullah or Muhammad or Ismail being released and welcome as a hero above the shoulders, that might encourage me to be part of Hamas, because they view it as a victory, and that weakens the moderate camp that I belong to in Palestine. Same thing could be said about Gaza.
As you wrote an op-ed about extremism that you go seeing on college campuses.
Yes.
Can you tell me why do you think there's so much extremism right now in college campuses?
College campuses, they are young, teenagers, full of energy. And you have now, in comparison to the 90s and the 80s, now you have social media, the power of TikTok and Facebook and etc. And they get to see raw footage from the war. And those, as I said earlier, young men and women, they believe in social justice. They might not even be Palestinian, but they are affected with what they see on college campuses. And add to that, the extremism comes from the fact that they believe what they are doing is correct, and this has to do also with the peer pressure.
And they end up harming a lot of the people that want to build a better future for their own people because of their extremist positions.
And it's the wrong venue. You are on campus, appreciate freedom of speech, and if you want to serve Palestine and the Palestinian cause, as I said earlier, you might want to introduce slogans and demand that are doable, and the U.S. administration, yes, the U.S. administration can hear and can act upon. And the best is a call for example, that's what I told the Stanford students and Ann Arbor students, that the best you can do to help us, Palestinians inside the occupied territory, is to call for America to recognize Palestine on the 1967 borders, for example. For the American administration to work for ending the military occupation, for example. These slogans are doable. And then when you put these slogans on the table, you give work for the American administration.
You're saying slogans that don't exclude or that don't call on the destruction of another state, and instead are calling for coexistence.
And that's doable. America could do something like that. America could work on restarting the negotiation, for example, or maybe America unilaterally can say, we recognize a Palestinian state under 1967 borders, for example. But America would never agree to a state from the river to the sea.
Are there any opinions that you're afraid to voice because of the polarization and extremism that's pervading our campuses and our social media and our world?
No, anything that has to, any position that furthers the implementation of ending the occupation and a negotiated two-state solution, I'm not afraid to say anything that serves that interest or that vision. Nothing. I come from a strong belief that the land between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean need to be shared exclusively by two people, the Israeli Jewish people and the Palestinian Arab people, and we need to find a way to negotiate a deal among us.
Do you pay a price for speaking up? Is there a cost for you speaking up?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. Not every Palestinian in my community and in Palestine is Ezzeldeen or things like the way Ezzeldeen thinks. So there are many people, more than 50%, more than half of the people, Palestinian people, they don't agree with my vision of coexistence with Israel, mutual recognition, and a negotiated two-state solution. So people call me sometimes trying to normalize the conflict. I've been called sellout by extremist maximalists, defending the Israeli and Jewish narrative. Yeah, so there have been...
Have you ever felt threatened physically? In Gaza you did, but in America, do you feel that or not?
In America, I did not feel threatened, but there were threats. There were threats. So, for example, when I first tried to introduce One Voice on campus in DePaul University, I thought it would be easier to first approach Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims. But when I had my first meetings with the Palestinians students at DePaul University, turned out they are students for justice in Palestine.
Very radicalized.
They were radicalized, and then I received an email from them saying you are not welcome to come back to DePaul University with your narrative. That did not stop me. I did not feel that I'm scared and they're going to break my legs if I go back to DePaul University. So I continued going to DePaul University, and I was successful enough to establish a chapter where Jews, Palestinians, Indian, Mexicans were part of the chapter, and we did events, and we brought Abdullah Hamarshi to speak on campus. We did many events at DePaul.
You no longer live in Gaza, but you have family there,
Yes.
and you're in constant touch
Yes.
with them. What do you think the youth of Gaza think today and see as their future?
Well, the youth in Gaza are not all the same. In Gaza, we have two camps. We have the camp that is on the side of the extremist maximalists, that is Jihad and Hamas. And you could say like approximately there are a hardcore of maybe 30 to 40% who support that way of thought. But on the other hand, you have 55 or 60% who want to see the Palestinian Authority back in Gaza. They want to see a light at the end of the tunnel, meaning that eventually we're going to be free of the occupation, have our own Palestinian state. So I think it's very important for those youth to be exposed to a moderate narrative, and that to be done by Palestinians. Because the situation in Gaza, especially because of the war and the destruction, paints a very dark vision for the future. So I think interjections of moderate Palestinians through NGOs, because the Palestinian Authority is not doing the job, might be a way of enlightening those Palestinians and giving them hope that tomorrow will be better, because no one is doing that now. And Daniel, what do you think about the Israelis, the public, in particular, and the youth in Israel? What will it take for those youth to again accept coexistence, contemplate the idea of mutual recognition, and eventually the emergence of a neighboring Palestinian state right next to Israel.
I think it's gonna we have our work cut out for us. I think that this war has damaged an entire generation, and Israelis have no contact with Palestinians. In their all the 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, they've never met a Palestinian like you and I met a friendship, because those walls have been closed off. And then this war and the trauma from October 7th and the trauma of the war and the extremism abroad that, like we discussed, makes them feel even more like there's no partner on the other side. I find it very difficult to believe that in the coming years, you know, you and I and our Israeli and Palestinian partners in One Voice used to have this debate about how do we build a movement where the Israelis don't think there's a Palestinian partner, the Palestinians don't think there's an Israeli partner. Who's going to come first to show that they're a partner? Who's going to be the Anwar Sadat? And I find it so hard right now to imagine that Israeli youth will trust. Like, we can't give up hope in building that, but I think it's going to take many years of baby steps to help show Israelis and Palestinians that there's a way. At the end of the day, history shows that there's no other way